Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Omega Metroid podcast from OmegaMetroid.com. My name is Andy Spiteri, reunited with Dakota Lasky. Dak, how you doing, dude?
Oh, fantastic! I'm living the dream out here. But yeah, it's good to be on the show. Good to be chilling with y'all, and yeah, I'm
Yeah.
doing pretty good.
And for the first time, we have a member of our Omega Metroid team who is responsible for a lot of great articles that you read on the site. You may know him as the Accursed Hunter. We know him as Big Griffin Only. How you doing, dude? It feels like a long time coming to finally get you on the pod with us.
Yeah, doing pretty good. Usually just work schedule's never the same from one week to the next,
I
but
know.
finally everything is aligned perfectly on quite the topic it is aligned for today.
Yeah, and if you're watching on YouTube, you can see in the background, Big Griff has a couple cool statues there. I spot Light Suit Samus. I spot the new first four figures Samus helmet. What else do we got behind there, Griff?
There's the various suit Prime 2 um, statue back there, and more to the right of the helmet would be the big Meta Ridley statue whose wings glow in the dark,
Oh,
just barely.
Dak, you have that one too, don't you?
I do have that as well. Yes, I think we're the.
Nice.
Do you have that, Andy? Or
You
you?
know,
Is it
I
just
actually
two
I
of us?
don't have any first four figure statues, and I don't know. I don't know. It's just it was always something that I was just like, I don't know if I want to spend that kind of money, which is strange because I have like a ton of amiibo and stuff like that. So I don't know if it's like that those are like smaller and thus cheaper, but like I buy a lot of them, so it probably adds up to the cost of like one first four figure. But yeah, I don't have any, which I feel like I should because there's a ton of Metroid ones, there's a ton of Zelda ones, and I mean like that's kind of my deal. So yeah, you
Your
guys have definitely
wallet
have a
will
leg up on me.
I don't know if your wallet will survive getting all of them. There's a
Yeah,
fair amount.
dude, I
I
don't know
think
if my
just one
wallet
is
will survive
good.
getting one of them, let alone all of them. So
I've actually also got a like the Prime 1 gunship statue over in the far corner, but it's not quite as big as the other statues.
yeah, that's pretty sick. Actually, that's an amiibo I wish that they would make is Samus's gunship. But nevertheless, yeah, we are here today to celebrate a monumental date, and it's not quite day to day, but we are celebrating the 1 year anniversary of Metroid Dread, arguably the biggest Metroid title ever, arguably, and in some ways, perhaps the most important Metroid title ever. So, yeah, it's we're gonna dive into everything Metroid Dread and where we were and how our thoughts are and stuff like that. But before we get there, I do want to point out one thing, or announce, I guess, one thing, and that, my friends, is that if you love Omega Metroid and you want to rock Omega Metroid and show off Omega Metroid to your friends, you are in luck because launching this week is the official Omega Metroid merch store, and I launched it a couple weeks ago now, actually, and ordered a T-shirt in the mail just to make sure that like they didn't suck or anything like that. And I'm happy to report that they are good quality. They don't shrink when you wash them. The logo doesn't fade off when you wash them or anything like that. There's tons of different colors that you can get. Me and my wife both picked up some Omega Metroid swag, and now you will have the opportunity to do that as well when that launches this week. I priced everything as literally dirt cheap as I can, just to try and pass that on to everybody. So essentially, what is there is at cost. So yeah, that's going to be coming up pretty soon. It's going to be kind of a cool way to show your love for Omega Metroid or the pod or anything like that. So excited about that. And we will have some more designs and stuff like that as we continue and as we go forward. If you have any suggestions, any catchphrases or favorite lines or whatever that you've heard us say on the pod, let me know. I'm always looking for new designs. But yeah, that's launching this week, so that's very cool. I've been working on that for a while. That was actually a Patreon incentive, so we've reached that. So now I have to think of another one. So yeah, kind of cool.
Very nice. I am looking forward to the Omega Metroid hockey jersey,
Yes.
which I hope happens eventually, but I'll be picking that up. But yeah, definitely go check that out. And look at that, we've come so far that now we have our own apparel. Look
Yeah.
at that.
You need some giant hat that's just a Metroid you sit on your head.
I didn't see the hockey jersey option on
I wouldn't be
Teespring,
surprised.
unfortunately, but that would
Yeah.
be pretty awesome. I could imagine it actually looks a lot like a Calgary Flames jersey, black and red and whatever. Anyways, let's talk about Metroid Dread, fellas. And so Dak and I have had the opportunity to talk about Metroid Dread and we were there when it was announced. We did a show that day. But Griff, maybe I thought that we could start with you and just kind of walk us through like your initial reaction, your moment when you were just like, this is real. And not only is there because there were rumors of a new 2D Metroid game, but like when it was announced as like Metroid Dread, I just thought that was like absolutely huge. It seemed like incomprehensible that this game from 10, 15 years earlier was being made. So tell us about like where you were, what was going through your head when that announcement dropped at E3.
Well, I had work like right after the direct ended, so luckily I was able to watch the whole thing. There wasn't any network snafus because back in E3 2017, when Prime 4 got announced, my internet went out, so I kind of missed that one.
Rip.
Although a friend of mine messaged me on Facebook, was like, Prime 4, Prime 4! I'm like, what are you talking about? And then I saw, whoa. But anyway, for Dread, I saw it. Although, because I'm a part of I hear all sorts of stuff on the internet, but I've heard it's like, oh, they're finally going to announce Metroid Dread at E3, and I'm like, I hope so. But I mean, then again, the last time there's in E3 2017, there was rumors of a 2D and 3D Metroid would be like two Metroid games that we announced there, and no one believed it until it actually happened. So I'm like, is it? Maybe it's time, because I always thought that a Metroid 5 would eventually happen, because they can't keep Fusion at the end of the timeline forever, right? Hopefully.
Wow, it felt like forever.
Yeah.
Nearly 2 decades, but when it finally dropped, it was amazing. Like the power suit of the design, it just jived with everybody, because by the end of that one day, there was like 80 plus quality drawings of fan art on Twitter. It was ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
And just the action looked ridiculously fluid. The graphics looked great. There was a Chozo in the trailer for a second, and that blew me away. Like, there's actually gonna be Chozo in this game, finally, after all these years, along with everything. Like, I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that what you said there was something that I really remember from that game, and I was working that direct for Zelda Dungeon because we knew that Breath of the Wild 2, which is now Tears of the Kingdom, is going to be there. And this trailer is so much better than the Breath of the Wild 2 trailer that we got that day.
Dread trailer
such a hater.
That Dread reveal trailer was perfect.
It was awesome.
Like Metroid 5, not in the game at all, but if you knew, you knew. Because plenty of people are like, Metroid 5, oh, what's going on? But everyone
I think they even said Metroid 5 in the trailer, right?
Yeah, it was in the trailer, but not the actual game. So some people were confused, but everyone who knew was going ballistic at that point.
So I remember watching that trailer, and the thing that stuck out to me the most was Samus's power suit and how it was like different than anything that we had seen before. It actually kind of reminded me way back when the first Breath of the Wild trailer came out and Link was in his like blue tunic and not like the usual green. Kind of like signified a shift away from everything that series had been doing before. And while I wouldn't necessarily say that Dread was like a complete shift away from what 2D Metroid had been doing before that, it was just like something very unique and like visceral that made it stand out. And then just seeing the Emmys and the tone that trailer set, I think that was one of probably the best Metroid trailers I've ever seen, maybe the best. And just like, yeah, I remember a lot of people were absolutely stoked that it came out in October that year, but you could have made that trailer and announced it for like the next year. And I just think that like seeing Metroid Dread alive and like a thing was so unbelievable to me that I will like literally never forget that. I was like screaming to a bunch of Zelda Dungeon employees over Discord. It was an incredible moment.
Like it was definitely one of those moments where like you go back and you immediately rewatch the trailer like over and over and over again, which that doesn't happen very often these days for me. So I was really excited to have a game. I mean, I was with my boy Dre in my room and we just popped off for that. Yeah, it was definitely something that like it was a very visceral of like, oh, I can't believe this is actually happening. It was almost like I didn't know what to do with myself because there'd been so much anticipation and so much like, oh, like is it gonna happen? It's not gonna happen. And then when it actually happens, you're like, oh wow, like that's actually a feeling I didn't think I would ever have. Yeah, definitely a surreal experience.
And it was on the Treehouse later, which was incredible to see large sections of the game in action, and along with the development history video where they actually went in depth. So it's just like they're actually telling us this stuff. Huh.
Yeah,
Like, I wonder when are we gonna get the Prime 4 development history video? I'd really love to see
I
about
don't
that.
think we'll ever get that.
that could be like an 8-part Netflix documentary, I think, one day. But yeah, that's like a great point actually, because I remember like after that initial trailer came out, and it was littered with like cool things. You mentioned the Chozo, like that was awesome and stuff like that. But like even like in the road up to Metroid Dread, it definitely felt a lot different from previous Metroid titles. We had the extensive Treehouse gameplay, we had the Sakamoto diaries, we had the development history, we had like the recaps and stuff. It kind of finally felt like, all right, like we're all in on this Metroid Dread game, and like even that was very unfamiliar territory for a Metroid game. So yeah, just like the reveal was like one of the absolute most incredible things that I've seen in my Metroid fandom, and then the road to it was incredible too. Just the second trailer that came out where you had Kraid and you had Ravenbeak and just like that incredible fight between them, it was like so unbelievable, and it really made Metroid Dread feel like a huge deal, especially when as we were told, this was the conclusion to the 2D Metroid series. I mean, we could talk about that story wise later. I know that didn't necessarily land for everybody, but it did feel like to me like this was a big deal. This was a big thing. It was like a big moment in Metroid. So I will like literally never forget where I was when that trailer came off.
I have a question real quick since you brought it up for the both of you, because you brought up the trailer where Kraid and Ravenbeak are shown, and I remember that was a big point of contention of
Yes.
should they have shown Kraid before the game came out, or should they have kept it a secret? I remember that was pretty divisive. I remember both sides being very like, they had to show Kraid because that's what gets people into the game, right? Like showing that off, and like maybe lapsed Metroid fans might see that and be like, "Oh, check that out." And then a lot of other people were like, "I would have rather been surprised while playing the game to see Kraid." And I would say, personally, I thought both sides had really good points to make there. I did think it was a great selling point to have Kraid come back like that, but how awesome would it have been if it was a surprise? So I'm curious now that we are kind of, I mean, over a year removed from that trailer,
Right.
and I'll throw it to you, Andy. Actually, I'll throw it to Griff.
Yeah, let's throw it to Griff first.
I want to hear what you have to say on this. What do you think? A year later, do you think it was the right move to show Kraid before the game came out? Should it have stayed of surprise? Or you think, no, it was good that they showed it beforehand?
Me personally, I say it was a bit too much to show Kraid, but I've seen also other people that are like, it's like a streamer for like Good Vibes Gaming on YouTube where one of the guests, Masay, was like, I saw the reveal trailer for Dread. It looked cool, but it wasn't quite enough to convince me to get the game. Then I heard people complain about the second trailer, and then I'm like, what are they complaining about? Let's watch it. And then after watching the trailer, she was convinced to get the game because it looked really cool to her. So some people like Metroid Parse, like me, seeing Kraid in the trailer got me hyped. But then again, I also would have preferred to see it in the game myself. And then there's also the fact that for me personally, again, when Ravenbeak showed up, the fact that there's some chosen warrior that can apparently defeat Samus, that to me kind of overshadowed the Emmy in importance. Because I'm like, I don't care about these robots. Who's that guy?
Yeah.
But
yeah,
I mean,
like I
the
kinda,
Emmys have their presence and they work pretty well, but it's just for some people, like it's like some things overshadowed the other.
Yeah, I kind of agree with what you said, Dak, originally. Like, I think I can understand the point of view where it's like I wish that Kraid would have been kept a surprise. I guess my own thing was like, I don't think that it's a spoiler because it has no context on.
Oh, it's definitely a spoiler. It's definitely a spoiler. I don't think it like because it spoils the surprise. That's what it means, like
You
it
still
doesn't
don't
have to
know why he's
necessarily be
there.
close to the story.
I mean, yeah, I guess in my definition of a spoiler to me would be like, all right, is Kraid being in this game important to the story? Is it important to the narrative? It wasn't really, so I guess I was okay with that. I mean, to me, it just got me excited to see Kraid back, right? Because like, and I think that a lot of people watching that trailer probably didn't know who Kraid was, and like, there's a lot. We can't underestimate how many new Metroid fans probably played this game not really knowing the big history of Metroid. And if they did know Metroid, they probably knew like the Ridley or Dark Samus from Smash or whatever, right? So I don't think that a ton of people knew who Kraid was. I can understand why some people would have been disappointed that Kraid was shown in the trailer. It probably would have been easy enough to show like another monster or something like that you can fight. But to me, I was just like, all right, let's go. Like this looks awesome. So
If spoiling Kraid if spoiling Kraid got a lot of new people to play the game, then it was a worthy sacrifice.
yeah,
I see. I agree with that, but I'm not convinced that it did do that. And I actually think that it would have been better staying a surprise because people who are excited to see Kraid in that trailer are, I would say, a
they were gonna
majority
buy
of
this game anyways.
they were going to buy the game anyway.
Yeah.
And I think people who don't know who Kraid is, I don't necessarily think they were convinced because Kraid was in the game. It was because they saw a cool trailer, which
Yeah.
could have not had Kraid in it and could have still been cool. So I would have rather it stay a surprise. I think I was on the other side of the fence when it first happened. I was like, you know what?
Yeah.
Kraid's a selling point. But saying that back makes me laugh because I don't think he is. But it was really dope. And like, it made me more confident as a fan. Like, oh, this game's going to be cool. But I was going to get it anyway. So ultimately, I think that would have been I think it would have made that part of the game way more memorable if Kraid all of a sudden showed up. Because now when we think back to that experience, we think more of the trailer that revealed it rather than the game experience that revealed it. So I think nowadays, I think it was a mistake to reveal him first.
Well, I have something too. Maybe a thought here is that I wasn't really upset by it because I kind of thought, and Dak, you were like the proponent of this, and I thought it made a lot of sense that there was going to be like an Emmy Ridley or something in this game. So I was like,
oh yeah,
I think Ridley is going to come back in some form or fashion. So like if they show Kraid, that's okay. Don't show the Emmy Ridley because that will be pretty cool. Which obviously, none of that happened. But I think in the grand scheme of things, like Kraid, you're right. I don't think he sold the game to any fans. Like everyone who recognized Kraid was going to buy this game anyways, I think. But I don't think that it like ruined anything for me. Like I was looking forward to the fight rather than like, oh my god, it's Kraid,
right. Yeah, no, you're definitely right there. I think it would have been so cool to find out.
Yeah, I can absolutely see like why someone would be like, oh man, like why you got to show Kraid,
Yeah.
So I think that both sides there are definitely valid and definitely have a point. Let's talk about the actual game itself. So the game comes out October 8th, 2021. Very short window from the E3 to the game release, which I think sometimes does a game justice and sometimes doesn't. I think Metroid Dread did just fine with the shorter window because Nintendo did a really good job of like marketing the game and building up a lot of anticipation in a short time, I think. So this game comes out, and like I said earlier, I think that you could make the argument that this is probably the most important, let's say, 2D game since Super Metroid, just in terms of like how the franchise like progresses and the mechanics and stuff like that, and maybe like one of the most just overall important games in the series since the original Metroid Prime. So much of what this game did, I think, is going to stay in the series and be like a staple going forward from now on. And there's like, so many new abilities, so many new moves, so many just the whole package. I feel like is just such a step forward. And we kind of saw the seeds of this with Samus Returns. I think that was kind of like the foundation for a lot of what Metroid Dread did. But like, I feel like Dread just really took that next step and took it to the next level. And I guess I wanted to talk about a couple of different things here. And I guess that we could talk about maybe like the abilities and stuff like that first. I think that it's, we've kind of joked about it on the pod before, but like, it's such a simple thing, but the ability to slide, man, that was a game changer. Like it literally like changed how you play Metroid, and like it really eliminated your reliance on the morph ball. And I think that how can you not have that going forward in any kind of 2D Metroid, right?
Slide to me is the kind of thing where it's like, duh, of course, it's an obvious thing that Samus could probably do. And it like not just in movement, but also for combat and exploration, it's a multifaceted, very useful ability to have. And I would hope that it's not just in 2D Metroid, but I mean, first-person shooters for Prime, that sliding's an FPS standard now at this point. So
yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, I think this is something that needed to happen earlier. I think Samus Returns probably should have had this, and it takes away one part of like one thing I think maybe might have turned some people off to Metroid over the years was sometimes Metroid, especially 2D Metroid, can feel kind of clunky. Like even the older games can like if you know how, unless you know how to do cool tricks with like the speed boost or the shine spark, like the game can feel clunky. And when you just pick up the game, there's a lot of stop and go to the action in Metroid and even the movement. And obviously, one of the big things is like running, stopping, going into morph ball form, going forward in the morph ball form. So taking away that's a little bit of the stop and go for Metroid, I think really not just opens up the game, but actually makes it more accessible to people because the slide is very intuitive. So I was happy to see that, and yeah, I think it makes for a more fun experience. So I'm glad it came through. I think it could have came through earlier, but I mean, how many opportunities has Metroid had to reinvent itself lately? Not many. So,
No, many at all.
Like
not many at all.
The fact there's an instant morph ball button is automatically just a blessing because
I
it's
was
very
gonna
close.
say,
Just
yeah,
stopping,
that's a
crouching,
great
and then you
point.
morph ball.
Yes.
Yeah,
Just
more,
instant,
more
like it was instant.
streamlining.
It was instant with the turns by touching the touchscreen, which can be very or kind of a pain sometimes to try to do the claw maneuver to
Yeah.
to go into morph ball real quick. And even in the Prime games, it takes a bit too long to go from standing to morph ball and back again. So you only really use morph ball when you absolutely have to, as opposed to now you could slide or morph and just especially with speed booster tricks. Oh my lord!
Yeah, and that's a great that's one thing I wanted to talk about. Actually, I might as well talk about it now. Is like I feel like Dread really kind of like optimized the controls and kind of got rid of like you said, kind of the clunkiness. Like Super Metroid is one of my favorite games of all time, but like you got to stop and press down twice to get into morph ball mode. Whereas in Dread, you can slide and instantly go into morph ball if you're in a tunnel, or instantly turn into morph ball. And like it doesn't sound like a big deal, but it really is just like a very very nice transition. The flash shift, just being able to tap a button and kind of go and move. And like I think what it really boils down to is like Metroid Dread really keeps you moving and really kind of wants to carry your momentum over from screen to screen. Because like I think that in typical Metroid games, like when you first play them, it's usually kind of a slower pace like experience. Like you're stopping, you're scanning, you're looking, you're trying to find little hidden cracks. But like as you play that game more, you can get really fast at it. Like Super Metroid, you could be really fast at that game, or Metroid Prime. And Metroid Dread, I feel like you could just be really fast in general without having to kind of slow down and look if you don't want to. So I think that game does like a really good job just with its button layout, and I guess that helps too. Is like it's on the Switch, which has a lot more buttons than typically 2D Metroid has seen before. The one thing I would say that I wish it would have did differently is I didn't like the way that the speed boost activated. I'm kind of a fan of just like when you run, the speed boost activates like on its own, kind of like in Fusion or Zero Mission. I'm hoping that Dread maybe changes that instead of like pressing down on the button in the future. But like even that was, I think, more or less fine. So yeah, the way that it optimized the buttons, I feel like was just like it really like had you keep your momentum, which is fantastic. And let's talk. I mean, speaking of that, let's talk about the speed boost. That's probably the biggest thing that Metroid Dread changed. And again, something that I absolutely like. I feel like they can't go back to the way that the speed boost used to be, with the way that you can run and jump and slide with your speed boost. Like that was incredible. The way and the amount. Like I'm like a big fan of like the puzzles that you can get expansions from. This was like a really really big selling point and a really big high point of Metroid Dread to me.
Yeah, like this, like being able to run, jump, all that stuff with speed booster has been something I've always wanted to see, and Mercury Steam did basically all of that plus a bit extra. Like the only thing now I want to see is him using speed booster to like run on water or run up walls or something.
That would be cool.
But I don't know.
Super Mario action when he
I
runs up the
100% I 100% agree. That would be sick.
That would be awesome.
She's got the spider magnet. She could just stand on the wall and shoot people or run along. I don't know.
I think you're onto something, Griff. I think you're
like
cooking.
what else? Like what else could be done with the speed booster outside of like running on stuff like that? Like maybe some sort of upgrade to that.
I think that there could be an upgrade to the Shine Spark going forward. I'm not sure what that is, but like maybe you can activate your Shine Spark and do different things rather than just like shooting at a bullet or something. Maybe there's some room there, but this speed booster feels like as damn good as it's probably ever going to feel, which I think is another like awesome thing that this game did. So yeah, and the flash shift, of course, Dak, I know you're a big fan of the flash shift. I think that was also kind of like a game changer, but that wasn't the only upgrade that I felt like really, really like helped the momentum of this game. Like I think an underrated item is the cross bombs. And like how you can, because there's always those point of Metroid games where you're in a morph ball, that you're in a tunnel and you gotta pause, or lay bomb explodes. You roll forward one block, lay bomb explode, and it kind of takes forever. Where the cross bomb kind of takes care of that, or it can just propel you up. So I see a lot of people talking about the flash shift as a fantastic item, rightfully so. But I think the cross bomb is actually also like pretty awesome.
I agree. It just comes so late in the game.
Yeah, it does.
That like the flash shift you get pretty early, so you really get a lot of time to get comfortable with it and use it a lot more. And I do think it has more utility. Like the crossbows are really good at what they do, but the flash shift works so well in both combat and exploration.
Yeah.
It
Getting
has
from one place to the other quickly.
yeah,
If you have a long hallway, just flash shift, abuse it.
yeah, it was very multifaceted where I feel like cross bombs did like one or two things really well, but only did those two things and don't really have a big like part in combat. It's more so exploration and like streamlining that more, which like we've talked about all these things we were just mentioning. Dread does a great job of streamlining the Metroid formula, which I think, does have some drawbacks in some ways, maybe, but overall I think is very positive.
Mhm.
But at the same time, the flash shift I think is also more fun. Like, okay, the
I
cross bomb,
agree.
you're still laying a bomb, like it doesn't really change the gameplay like flow, like the gameplay loop, whereas flash shift completely changes how you control Samus, what you can do with Samus, and I think makes combat like way more frenzied and fun and even strategic at times. So I mean I think the flash shift is the best thing they added to Metroid. And it's so cool too. Like they made Samus in this game feel like such a like an awesome like the real space warrior that we know and like has that speed and like dashes around like it's crazy like that like a manga character really like this anime Samus we get. I absolutely love it. So I still think the flash shift's great, but you have a good point. I think even the cross bombs like really change
Yeah.
up the formula in a good way. So
Well, I mean, I didn't mean to say that I think they're better than the flash shift. I think the flash shift is like
right.
the best item that they put in this
Easily
game.
the best addition to the game, although there's plenty of other cool new stuff. With the
Yeah,
flash
the cross bombs just do a nice job of like streamlining, those instances where you have to lay a bunch of bombs and it's like, all right, come on, like let's get this going. One thing that I really loved in this game too was the storm missiles, which again seems like such a simple kind of upgrade, but it kind of felt like when you get them, it's like a complete game changer in the way that you can fight enemies and stuff like that. Like I feel like the combat was significantly improved after you get the storm missiles, and I can't see those ever not coming back.
They made the secret missiles good.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
And it kind of also acts like the charge beam for the missiles, especially if you have to flash shift over an enemy. Hold the R button. It's easier than using the claw maneuver to hold the shoot button for a charge beam.
Mm-hmm.
So you can just hold the R button while you're moving around, and once you get into position, you can lock onto multiple targets.
I do want to talk really quick because I'm a homer for this thing, but one thing that I do love about Metroid Dread, and I wouldn't say it made like a giant leap over previous Metroid games, but I think it really refined what previous Metroid games did here. Is I really like the interactive map like a lot. It's easy, it's simple, it's clean, it's very detailed, but only as detailed as you want it to be. And you can like navigate your way through all the different areas. Really small, simple thing, but I think that like Metroidvanias, like I play a lot of Metroidvanias, and like if you don't have a good intuitive map, it's really noticeable. It's kind of like when you have it, you don't notice it, but when you don't, you really notice it. So I wanted to give a shout out to the map of Metroid Dread. But I guess like we should talk about the big hook of Metroid Dread, which is of course the Emmy Zones, and this is what allegedly paused development way back when because they couldn't figure out a good way to implement this kind of gameplay mechanic, I guess you'd say. It's a pretty cool idea. I think that there's still like more potential there, although I don't think that we'll see these Emmy Zones come back. I do think that there could have been a little bit more there, but overall I do think that the idea was really cool. It definitely added some tension, definitely added some urgency. Kind of gave you a couple different ways to go about them. You could be stealthy, you could be... Although, to be honest, I don't know anyone that really is stealthy in these. But I don't know. What did we think about that concept a year later?
I think the strategy for going through enemy zones in general is just bum rush it, because I try to use the Phantom Cloak, but the enemies always seem to go exactly where I'm standing, and it's just like...
Indeed.
No, not... It's like they actually know where you are at all times. It's just they're pretending. But enemies are really cool. Like...
Yeah.
They're definitely trying to model the actually in a way that was kind of one of my concerns in a sense when Dread was coming out, because all I really had to go off of was the treehouse footage, and of course the treehouse footage, the players weren't really trying quote unquote to get away, because they could have, because they probably know what the game map is, but it's also just they only had the first two enemies to go off of, and they're basically tutorial areas. Really, they're not that challenging, because I'm like, are these like my biggest concern with them is just the part of the fear or the dread is you don't know where to go. It's part of the exploration. But the Emmys, they don't care at all, especially since they have these vents that they can go through, and you can't until they're defeated.
Mm-hmm.
So first time it can be tense and scary, but will they be threatening still on repeat playthroughs? And anyone who's replayed the game and had to deal with the speed Emmy can tell you, yes, they are still kind of a threat. So I'd say they are very effective at what they do, although they can definitely be annoying sometimes. Like they can just spawn in the exact worst possible place sometimes,
Right.
but that's usually not the norm. So they definitely keep you on your toes.
Yeah, I think they were a great addition. Obviously, very much an extension evolution of the SAX moments from Metroid Fusion, which are some, I think, the best moments of that game.
Hmm.
I think I would have preferred almost if the Emmys were not locked to the rooms and could free roam a bit more. I think it would have been number one, it would have led up to the Dread name more. If you had no idea all of a sudden an Emmy could come out at any time and take you on. Like having that in the back of your head and not knowing when that engagement could happen, I think would have played way more into like the fear factor of the game, though I don't even think there really is much of a fear factor in Dread because of how strong Samus can get. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I remember playing Fusion SAX. I legitimately did not want to get caught. Whereas, like, the Emmys, like, I guess I didn't want to get caught either, but didn't have that same because I knew they were always. I mean, they were always going to be in that room. Of course, the more times you play Fusion, you know where the SAX is also going to show up. But like, I wish in this game there was more of a anything could happen kind of chaoticness to it, where the Emmys like could show up at any moment, interrupt you at any time, and give you like a run for your life when you're in the middle of doing something. Like I think that would have played really well thematically into the game.
Yeah.
But aside from that, I really like the introduction of the Emmys. If we see them again, maybe not. They seem like a very one-off kind of game gimmick, but they were a fun gimmick. They added these really cool mini boss battles that were different, very engaging, very compelling, I think, and fun. And I wish that they got a bit stronger over time rather than not as like over time. I think it becomes a lot easier to deal with them,
Mm-hmm.
whereas I would have rather them become more challenging. That said, I I think the Emmys were a great addition. I just wish they weren't locked into their patrol rooms.
Yeah, I agree with
Biggest
you.
difference.
I think that I wouldn't have necessarily made the Emmys themselves like more challenging, but I would have made the rooms more like different, right? Like I think that
Yeah,
when you go to
that would work.
Dairon for the first time, it's dark, right? And I think that
Mhm.
if you had like a dark Emmy room, like that could have been really suspenseful or really engaging, because like the Emmy rooms, like the different areas of the planet are vastly different, but the Emmy rooms
Mhm.
do kind of have that same kind of aesthetic. So I think that what might have made him pop a little bit more is to have more of a unique setting, or maybe there's like one Emmy, kind of like you said, that roams around the entire area, and we don't have Emmy zones. I understand why we have Emmy zones, just in terms of the gameplay, but yeah, I think that that could have been cool too. I don't know if the technology was there or not for that, but that could have been, like I said, I think that there's still like promise in this concept, but I don't know if we're gonna see that concept come back. And I think if it doesn't, like I think that we can still look at Metroid Dread and say like this was really fun and a really like good part of this game. And could it have been I don't know, better? Yeah, sure. Things can always be better, but I do look back at it fondly, and like you said, it does kind of evoke memories of the SAX. Um,
Mhm.
so another thing
Oh,
that I think
before
that
we go ahead, real quick, I just wanted
yeah,
to
sorry.
say I don't believe that the Emmys couldn't have been done in the past. I definitely like. How could an Emmy like going from one DS screen to another? How sick would that have been? Like, I feel like the Emmy going back and forth would have been so cool. If anything, I think the Emmy rooms would have been more necessary back then on the DS or something, which maybe had less graphical power, less processing, smaller screens, etc. Like keeping them
Yeah.
locked in that area, I think would have made more sense. Now on this game, I would have hoped it would have been a bit more freeing, but I could definitely see this like the gimmick itself, maybe not the Emmys, but what they do coming back in the future. I mean, maybe
Hmm.
in Prime 4, Silex spends the game hunting you down and running into randomly throughout the game. You have to deal with them. Like that could be a way for like I doubt they're going to be Silex rooms if that's the
Can you
case.
imagine?
Like, that would be kind of funny if
That'd
Silex
be
is not
good.
allowed to leave these rooms.
Yeah,
But yeah, definitely overall something.
I agree with
Um,
you. I
I think it
think
could have worked on the DS.
I
I
think the
think that
biggest
to make
difference.
it work, you would have had to pre-program the routes that the Emmys take.
Yes, yeah, probably how it would have worked. Yeah,
But I think that would have been fine.
I
Like,
agree.
yeah. So
I think the biggest difference between the Emmys and SAX is at the beginning of the Dread, of Metro Dread, you know that there's a way to kill these Emmys. It's in all their zones, and that's the
True.
goal, to kill them. The
mm,
SAX, you could do nothing.
Yeah.
Hide,
No.
and if it sees you, run. That's all you could do. And once you got
Yeah.
like the only way is that Adam at some point tells you that the plasma beam might work, but even then, you're still fighting Samus to full power. That's not an easy foe to take out.
Right.
So, and the
That's
Emmys
that's a great point.
yeah, and like another thing is the idea of if the Emmys are able to roam around all like or sometimes come out, that would definitely be cool. But they'd also have to like design the whole map around the fact that an Emmy could come out
Right.
after you.
That's fine.
Like
That's fine with
it's
me.
like it's kind of like I've heard people say that in a Fusion remake have like the SAX randomly spawn in rooms, which to me kind of sounds bad in a way because it's like there are some one tile rooms. If the SAX is there, then you're kind of screwed because it's just RNG hoopla. But
Yeah, they
I
can
think
make
that
it so
again,
that the
that,
SX
though.
doesn't show up though. Like you
Yeah.
just like, hey, the SX can't show up in these rooms. It can only
Yeah.
show up in a few of these rooms. I
if
think
you
they
had
could
to if you
avoid
had to
that.
fight Ridley and an SAX, that would be
That would be
That would be
so
awesome.
cool.
First of all, that would be
If it-
sweet. But second of all,
Yeah.
yeah, there's clearly rooms where you're going to say, like, okay, the SAX cannot spawn in this room. Or I don't know if you've ever played Alien Isolation, Griff, but, like, there's certain points where, like, the Xenomorph doesn't spawn. Like, story events happen, and, like, the Xenomorph is out of commission for a little bit. So, he's
also, like, the
you
chaser
get a
and then-
break.
there's also these like chaser entities and like sometimes in Resident Evil Village, but there are clear rooms that they cannot enter, and you can just stand past the doorway
Yeah.
and look at them standing there because they can't go in after you.
Yeah, I think
But-
that could work. I'm sure that there's a
Yeah.
Fusion remake that's coming in the next couple years, and I think that we could see that actually. I think that could be a big gimmick because it kind of feels like a way to get another crack at the Emmy Room concept, but also to stay true to what they were trying to do with Metroid Fusion. So I think that that's actually a pretty decent possibility. But I do want to segue into something that you were just talking about, Griff, and that is the boss battles of this game. And I think that like the boss battles were like really, really strong. Maybe you could argue that like the Ravenbeak battle, I think, might be one of the best in the series, like a top 3 boss battle in the series. 1 year later, where do we stand on some of these bosses? I'll start with you, Dak.
I agree. I think this is some of Metroid's best bosses throughout the entire franchise. Like giving the best Metroid bosses of the past a run for their money. Like this is probably one of Dread's absolute strong suits. Like almost every boss battle in this game feels like a challenge, and a lot of them are very fun. Like when the Kraid boss battle coming back as one of the ones that like is surpassed by so many others in the game. That's how you know it has a lot of like
Yeah.
strong boss battles. Like the Kraid boss battle is really good, and that's just like a starter boss battle, I think, compared to the other stuff you end up running into in the game. There are definitely some parts where like there's some annoying pattern repetition, like just stuff that can be sometimes a bit unfun. But I think that happens with a lot of boss designs. That's hard to avoid that. That
Seems to me
said,
like-
like,
Yeah.
go ahead.
It seems to me kind of like Kraid was like the first boss that actually challenges you because the first like Corpius, he doesn't deal a whole lot of damage, but then Kraid he can take a good chunk of health off you if you're not careful. You will die because I died a handful of times the Kraid first time around because
Oh,
he's
yeah.
probably like the best Kraid fight too.
That's
Oh,
definitely
easily.
true. It is definitely the best Kraid fight.
Yeah, I just replayed the Zero Mission Kraid fight, and like it's between that and Super, and like especially Nestroid, this is by far the best Kraid fight. I think like even the worst fight in this game, which I think people tend to say Dragaiga is the worst boss fight, like the big Kraken water thing.
The underwater fight,
Yeah.
yes.
I think even that one is actually kind of like okay because it's
unique.
It's
Which is the
unique,
least
yeah.
good.
It's different. It's kind of you versus the water more so than like you versus the monster.
Mm-hmm.
But
The most
yeah,
painful, like I played like a Dread playthrough not too long ago, and like the only part of Dragiga that I didn't like is when he spammed like in this like the second phase because you can't kill him in one cycle no matter what equipment you have on you for whatever reason. But like in the second half, quote unquote, like Dragiga can just spam these tentacle attacks underwater, and he just won't do anything else. And it's just like I can't dodge this. He's like, I mean, there is a grapple point up above he can grapple to avoid. Where
Dude,
these one with like these 3 tentacles come at you.
it took
you can
me
use the
so
grapple point
long to
dodge
realize
that.
that you were supposed to grapple up there to avoid that. Yeah, every time before I was just like, am I supposed to just
How do
get
I
hit?
dodge this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about the story of Metroid Dread. Divisive topic. But so I think that if you look at it in a vacuum, I think the story of Metroid Dread is really strong. Kind of I think that for me, you kind of have to look at it more as a sequel to Samus Returns with some elements of Metroid Fusion to get like the most out of this story. And I think importantly, it kind of sets up like a lot of really cool opportunities about like where we could go next in the series, and what like the title of the series Metroid actually means. So we'll get to you in a sec, Dak. But Griff, what do you think of the story of Metroid Dread? We've kind of had some differing opinions over the last year on what ultimately unfolded. With with time to sit and cook on it, where do you come out on this story?
It's unfortunate that the story just decides to stop and put a bunch of questions out there at the very end, the last minute. And for the thing is, we don't even know if any of these will be answered again. Granted, Quiet Robe, that thing with him and his ex helping Samus, that will probably remain a mystery because that's probably the point. But other things, like Samus is part, like the Thoha can control the Metroids, but Samus is part Makin, and that's why she Metroid DNA weakened, and that's probably why it's given to her in the first place. Because it's sort of this is why the Metroids attacked her throughout the series, which is also Thoha. Should she control them? Maybe that's because they are going to be answered later, and this is just this things to think about until then. But like that's like the biggest stuff that they just drop a bunch on you at the very end of the game, and we don't even know if they'll be answered at all. Although it's just some stuff to think about. But like in a way, the story was probably my biggest concern when Dread was coming out, just in the sense of there's a bunch of like this is the first 2D game in a long time, end of a story arc. There's Chozo here for the first time in the game. It's also apparently baggage from other games you're carrying in. How are they going to balance a story like this, like on top of the gameplay and exploration people want and expect from Metroid? And I like their solution was just an expedition dump in the beginning, middle, and end, like a Kingdom Hearts game. And like the thing in the middle with Quiet Robe, I'm just like, yes, I'm here for this. Give me more. And then the Ravenbeak stuff at the end, that was definitely plenty of bombs dropped, but it's just a bunch of things that like, are any of this being answered? And of course, there's also the Federation side of things, where they definitely exist. They're definitely a thing that are around, but there's stuff from Fusion where it's just not really brought up, although it's kind of hinted, sort of, with Adam, where it's like, this mission isn't, the pay isn't appropriate, the risk outweighs the reward, and there's like the Emmy, or like they're named after the abilities they have. So, were they created by the Federation for a specific purpose? To, like, of course, some people think maybe they were designed specifically to get Samus' Metroid DNA. I don't know, but it's unfortunate the Federation plot wasn't carried over in any meaningful way, but then again, the Chozo would have overshadowed that anyway, just because it's been a long time coming for any major Chozo thing to appear, because, like, how it was for me, I'm like, Emmy, who cares? Who's out Chozo guy?
Right.
So, like, the story is definitely enjoyable. I just wish there was a bit, like, there was a bit too much dropped at us at the end, I guess. It's kind of hard to finalize my thoughts on that, because we don't even know if they'll even continue that stuff, where it'll just be like, here's the new plot. Wait, Chozo? Ravenbeak? Who cares about that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree with everything you just said. Yeah, I think the story is I think the thing that really didn't allow me to really fully get immersed into Dread was the lack of a story I enjoyed and a soundtrack I enjoyed. Those two things. The gameplay, great. Graphics, great. But the soundtrack, the OST, and the story really lacked for me. And Griff, I think you nailed everything, because, like, yeah, there's so much stuff that's introduced in this game, especially at the end of the game, that there's almost really too much, because the game is simultaneously trying to be an entry point for new players and wrap up stuff from previous games and introduce completely new things that are both wrapped up in this game and also extended for however long past this game. I think it's trying to do too much. Obviously, some of this comes into my personal bias of I wanted a Fusion sequel in terms of story, and it's very much a Fusion sequel in terms of timeline, but very much so, like you said, Andy, a sequel to Samus Returns, which is not really what I wanted. So I wasn't interested in a lot of the new stuff. I'm not really like the whole, once they start getting into the nonsense of like Samus's DNA and it controlling the Metroids and Ravenbeak, I'm like, oh, this is like not what I'm here for. Like, as much as Metroid has a lot of like sci fantasy stuff to it, science fantasy to it, I still always felt the story itself for the most part felt grounded. Like, there's a viral outbreak on a ship, got to deal with it. There's a planet you have to explore, there's monsters on it. You know, you have your space, but like for the most part, always felt kind of grounded. And then when you start getting into like the family stuff and all these different like influences in the game and stuff that's completely introduced in this game and nowhere else, that's where it really lost me. And then structurally, how the game like hits you with a ton of information at once and then nothing, and then a ton of information in the middle and then nothing, and then a ton of information at the end. There's no like, you know, and I've said this all before on the show, so this is nothing new. I still pretty much how I feel about the game.
Right.
You know, there's no kind of recap at the end, no like reflection. Samus as a character is very two-dimensional. She's super cool. She's awesome. She's really cool to watch. She takes no like, you know, doesn't back down. This is the Samus I like, but it's missing that humanness, I think, that I really liked from Samus that we got in Fusion. I don't think
Samus when Samus Fusion was told the Federation was going to capture the X, she immediately threw them under the bus. She's like, "What are you, stupid? What are you doing this for?"
Like Samus very much felt like a real individual with a real personality, and here Samus has cool reactions to stuff and is a badass, but I lost that humanity of her character, that self-reflection that I really enjoyed, as well as her connection with Adam, which is non-existent in this game too. And then, of course, all the side of, you know, there's no Federation stuff. Like, I would have rather seen the Federation plot continued and then do the Chozo stuff. You can't really do both. Griff is totally right. The Chozo stuff was always going to overshadow it. I just think it was trying to accomplish too much, introduce too many things, bring back too many things. It didn't really know what it was. Is it supposed to be a sequel, like really for the story previously? Is it supposed to be a new entry point? Is it supposed to make the parts of the Metroid story accessible? Is it supposed to build on that? I never felt that it really knew what it was wanting to do in terms of story, and for that reason, I wasn't a big fan of it.
Right. You know what? I've defended the story of Metroid Dread in the past, and I will again, but I think that what you just said is fair, both of you. Particularly with the pacing of the story. There is a lot at the beginning, a lot in the middle, and a lot at the end, and I think that it would have behooved them to maybe break it down into, like, even 5 acts instead of, like,
Spread
3.
it out.
Yeah. I think that would have went a little bit of a way, or a longer way. I do think that the Adam stuff missed in hindsight. Like, I think that the reveal of Adam as Ravenbeak was kind of...
that was cheesy.
Yeah, it was just kind of like... It just seemed like... not to make sense. Like, because, like, throughout the whole game, I never, ever thought that I was talking to anybody but Adam. Like ever. Right? And, like, at the end, when he kind of started talking in a little bit of a different way, like, you will submit or something like that, and I was like, that's weird. I actually thought that Adam was, like, a bad guy. I thought he was the bad guy, and when it was Ravenbeak, I was just kind of like, oh, okay.
Well, it's his planet, so...
I mean, I guess, but he was just kind of like, yeah. I do think that aside from that, though, like, the story to me was fairly straightforward, fairly simple. I know that there's definitely some people that are muddied on the DNA part at the end, but I mean, I think I got a fairly good handle on it. So Samus was infused with Mach-In DNA. So there's 2 Chozo tribes, Mach-In and Thoha. Thoha control the Metroids, Mach-In are warriors. Samus has Mach-In DNA, which reacts to Metroids. Quiet Robe was left alive because he can control Metroids. I mean, I guess as I'm saying this, it sounds like...
As you're saying this, I'm like, bro, this is nonsense. What are you talking about?
But I feel like in the context of the game, when they were explaining it, I was like, okay, that makes sense. Samus has Mach-In DNA. That's fine. Samus also has Metroid DNA. That's fine. And I feel like I was like, yeah, this is fine to me. I do agree. I think it would have been nice to make mention of the Federation plot. I'm not upset that they didn't do that plot in this game, because I do think that there's still opportunity to do that, particularly with what you said, Griff. Like, we know that there's a corporation called Excellion who made the Emmys. What's their deal? Do they work for the Federation? I think that still has an opportunity to be addressed. Is it too little, too late? It depends on who you ask, but I think that it would be fine. But
as long as Samus has Metro DNA in her body, people are going to come after it.
Well, like, that's the big key, I think. That's where they really want to go with the Federation point, and say, like,
who cares,
okay, now Samus is full Metroid. Like, we got to go after her. So in that, like, first of all, I think the reveal of Samus in her Metroid suit was, like, so awesome. That was so badass when that happened. And I do think that opens up some really interesting opportunities for the next game, and particularly if you want to jumpstart that Federation storyline. What better way than, like, you got a living Metroid in Samus? But I do think that it's fair what you guys said. I do, like, I wouldn't rank this among the best stories in the Metroid series, but I think at the same time in Metroid, like, the simplest stories are often the best, and this was a complicated story. There's a lot of stuff that went down, and I don't necessarily disagree with your assessment, Dak. It was serving a lot of masters here, and maybe instead of going like 100% in, you know, the one direction, it kind of did like 70% in a couple different directions, you know?
Yeah.
I think that's fair.
You needed the scan visor.
Yeah,
That would have
you know
changed
what?
everything.
We've talked about this forever ago. 2D Metroid really should have a scan visor. Really
Like
should.
press left on the D-pad, activate the scan visor, hold the free aim, and then scan it whatever you're looking at. And
I
hold the R button
agree,
or something.
but it wouldn't have solved, I think, this game's problems
No,
because
it
the
wouldn't
lore,
have.
the lore, I mean, that visor, the scan visor, really is just complementary to the main story. But if you make it a requirement to understand what's happening or make it more enjoyable, a lot of people are gonna be kind of locked out of that. And
Right.
If
not get that
Sakamoto
experience.
wants to make a 30-hour plus 2D Metroid epic, I'm all for it. If it's just more of it, just shows the stuff, I guess. But whatever.
All right, so we're kind of talking about some, we were talking about the story. Then my next topic was things that maybe the next Metroid game, 2D or even Prime or whatever, could learn from Metroid Dread in terms of improving maybe some areas that Metroid Dread didn't, exactly knock it out of the park. I think that story we've talked about. I think that the general consensus among Metroid fans is that music is a weakness of Metroid Dread, which I would agree. I don't think it's as god awful as everyone else thinks, but I'm also not going to sit here and say that I think it's a strength of this game. I do think that it could have used a remix or two. I think that would have maybe helped it. And the remixes that were in the game were the wrong ones because we've heard a million Red Brinstar remixes and we've heard, just like a lot of that before. I think that like some kind of remix, maybe in like the water area or the forest area, would have helped those areas stand out a little bit. I do think that I thought that was a weakness in Samus Returns as well, was the soundtrack, and I think unfortunately that carried over to Metroid Dread. So I don't know if that's just a Mercury Steam thing or what, but definitely something that they should look at in the future.
The Samus Returns, I think, part of the music thing was just kind of another aspect of the game's major issues are that it's a Metroid 2 remake, sort of. They have to kind of adhere to some of the Metroid 2 structures, and some, like most of the Metroid 2 soundtrack was ambient stuff.
No,
but,
you know what? I don't buy that actually, because I think that Metroid 2 has a really good soundtrack for being on the Game Boy. And then you look at AM2R, that game has like a just incredible soundtrack. And a lot of that is AM2R soundtrack is more closely based on the original Game Boy soundtrack than Samus Returns was.
I played Metroid 2, I think, 2 times. I remember the surface, the final area, and the Queen boss fight, and the baby music. That's like 4 songs. So I remember off the top of my head from Metroid
That's 4
2.
songs more than I remember from Metroid Dread. So,
What's the matter? You don't remember the Dairon theme?
oh no, you're right. I do remember that. Unfortunately,
I like the soundtrack, but I definitely understand why people aren't necessarily fond of it. There's
Yeah.
plenty of songs I've jammed out to, but that's just me.
no bangers.
No,
I
not
think it's- I
one
think it's-
banger.
I think for the game, like on scale, like if we're talking like relative, I think Dread is the worst soundtrack for its game. Like for being a Switch game in 2022 or 2021, I think it has the worst soundtrack for a Metroid game. I can excuse older games for not having as good of a soundtrack because they're older and whatever device they were made on, but Dread should not have as bad of a soundtrack as it does. And that's probably the biggest thing I would want to improve here.
So Other M's Ridley theme automatically catapults the entirety of that game's soundtrack above whatever Dread has.
I mean, yeah, Other M. I mean, look,
soundtrack
I'll
I
give
think is fine.
I'll give Other M a lot of crap, but one place it doesn't slack is the music. So I think there's actually a good amount of music on that OST. It's probably, aside from the cool finishing moves, the one thing that's good about the game.
All right, so
I don't think Other M's music is bad necessarily, but a lot of the songs for that is just more atmospheric, ambient stuff. Which is another complaint I've heard about Dread soundtrack.
But it's
I think I'm willing to say to you guys right here, and you can dump all. Dak's ready to jump on this already, but I think that I would say that Dread soundtrack is better than Samus Returns, better than Federation Force, and better than Hunters.
Oh, yeah, I agree with 2 of those.
But even saying from the bar that we expect from Metroid, yeah, that's obviously not the highest praise when we're talking about
they're
which
different
games
themes
better
though.
Than.
They're different styles though. I think Hunters is trying to achieve something differently with its music than
that's
what
fair.
For Hunters, there's like the 2 Arctera themes are really cool. I like the Alinos theme. Slench has a really actually pretty cool boss theme if you've ever listened to it. The 2 Korea themes are actually pretty good, although the first phase is a remix of all the Bounty Hunter themes because Korea is using their powers, and then the final phase is like the Prime Core Essence theme, but just kind of remixed a little bit. But there's plenty of songs from Hunters that I've recognized, and I think have done
Yeah,
pretty good.
and I'm not trying to dump on Hunters, but like I look at the
Yeah.
Dread soundtrack and I'm like, all right, I love the Emmy theme, like it's intense, it's kind of creepy. I love the Arteria theme, both of them actually, when it's the regular one and when it's frozen. I think that I kind of like the Dairon theme. I know that you don't like it, but I do. I do think that the Emmy Zone theme is like quiet and creepy, but I think that it kind of adds to that area. And I think the Ravenbeak theme is awesome. So, it's not like it's full of like stinkers. There are a couple bangers in there, but that's the most I'm going to defend this soundtrack. All right.
I like.
Fair enough.
Fair enough. In terms of
enough.
Ferenia's aesthetic and its music theme, it's probably like my favorite area in the game. I love Ferenia's music and overall aesthetic.
Yeah, actually, you're right. And that was the trailer music, I believe, was the Frenia theme.
There's like 5 seconds of it, and then it went into like the experiment boss theme, which is another really good song that I like at least.
I just overall I think what really like for me Dread is not a full package game. I think it has the best gameplay of any 2D Metroid, and I think some people would even argue it has the best gameplay of any Metroid. But obviously I'm a bigger fan of the 3D games, so that's how I'm gonna lean. I think just Dread falls short of being that full package game because it doesn't have the story or music aspect for me. So no matter how good the gameplay is, it's not a game I like am dying to go back to all the time. It was very much a game that I played. I was like, that was a lot of fun. That was great.
Right.
I didn't really have much interest aside from when Boss Rush mode came out, and even then, very limited. And not much interest really in going back and playing the game.
I think Prime 1's story is probably, in a way, the best example of Samus and the player as one entity going completely into the unknown. And the whole story is just you and the player and Samus exploring. Like, that's the story, because it's like all you and the Samus know going into the game is that first sentence. An unidentified distress signal has been detected from a derelict space station over Newton 4. That's all you know. The rest of the game is just exploring everything and finding out what the real threat is, what's going on, what you need to do, etc. Same kind of deal in Prime 2 and 3. And then Dread is just kind of just things happen, Samus reacts to it. Even though she does cool stuff, she's not a complete pushover. But it's not. She doesn't have quite the same agency as the other games in a way, despite it being freeform and it is very linear for the first like fourth third of it. And although for Fusion, it's like part of the gameplay story connection is that as you gain your abilities back, you're also slowly building up your agency. You see the SAX roaming around, you're like, that's me. I want that. And then once you get enough abilities, you start going off on your own. Like when the power goes out in the elevator and you get space jump, you go to Sector 2. Adam doesn't necessarily like that as well. But nothing like that is really in Dread in a way. I think that there's some sort of significant gameplay story connection, if that makes any sense. At least not that I can think of off the top of my head.
No, I think that's a good point, yeah.
I don't know. I wouldn't agree with it being a linear game. I think that the pacing of Metroid Dread is so good that you just kind of get that feeling where like you're not lost. Whereas I think that if you're playing other Metroid games, you can easily kind of get turned around and stuck and lost and stuff like that. And it might seem more, I don't know, open-ended or something like that. Like if you're playing Super Metroid for the first time, you're going to get lost, right? Like for sure. Whereas if you're playing Metroid Dread, I think that game does such a good job of like kind of giving you subliminal clues of like where to go from point A to B to C that like you don't really get that. So I think that could be maybe why you feel like a little bit more like a straightforward path. I do want to bring up one more thing actually before we kind of move on from this entirely, because I do think that Metroid Dread has one thing in hindsight that I wish it would have done and it didn't, and that was include a boss battle with an Emmy. And for a long time I thought that it was going to be a Ridley Emmy, but I think that even when you get to the final Powerbomb Emmy and he kind of comes in and you awaken your Metroid ability, I really wish that you could fight that Emmy versus like another Spear Chozo Warrior thing. I think that was in hindsight something that I wish they could have got that. I wish they could have got that Emmy fight in there.
Like in a way I kind of agree with you, but that cutscene of Samus using her Metroid power to drain something. That's like probably my favorite cutscene in the game.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Out of all,
it was awesome.
Like all the time Samus has dealt with the Metroid, she's using their power and. That Memes have been heckling you the whole game, and it's like, how do you like it?
Yep.
And although one thing, just go back for a little bit, it's like Metroid Dread's only really linear for like the first fourth or third of the game, because it's like once you get the spider magnet, there are these like two doors that lock, and you have to go fight Corpius. And once you get fight Corpius and you get Phantom Cloak, there's this N-key fire plant, and it's blocking your path, and you can't go back. You must go to Cataris. And it's like until you get like think like speed boost, like not speed booster, like various suit, diffusion beam, then you can kind of explore around. Because I remember in my first playthrough, there's a point where I just went around for like an hour over previous areas looking around for things, and then I eventually decided to move on.
Hmm.
So it's like it's definitely forcefully linear for like the first third, but then eventually it starts to open up, and there is definitely subtle clues of like when I was in Ferenia and did everything there, and I'm like, I have the space jump and star missiles now. The only way forward is through cold rooms, so I guess I gotta go back to like Berenia. It's buried in water, but I haven't really. Well, there's nowhere else to go, so let's go down there. And I got gravity suit, and it's like actually, like you know how like in Metroid Two Prime Two, you get gravity boost by going through so much water, and then you also immediately leave. Dread is literally worse because you get the gravity suit, and like 5 seconds later, you're out of the water and you don't come back. Like you only go back that way to fight the Chozo soldiers to go to Gavarin, and you never go back to Berinia ever again. At least in terms of the initial route, which like that's kind of an interesting path. But although
Well, I
going
mean,
through
you
water
get
and then
gravity
getting
very,
gravity suit,
very late in this game. Very late.
going through the water and getting the gravity suit, I'm like, finally, I'm liberated.
All right, let's
Although
move
I know
on. Let's talk
Jack is
about
very
Metroid
excited.
Dread's legacy here because we're 1 year removed. We can start talking about the legacy of this game. We know that it's the best selling Metroid game. Surely over 3 million copies at this point, which I mean doesn't seem like a lot in the grand scheme of things, but for this series on this system with this publisher, it's a pretty big achievement. So I think that we can say that Metroid Dread did create a lot of new fans, a lot of new Metroid fans. Maybe not as many as we had hoped, because I do think that maybe we were hoping for a little bit of a bigger number sales wise, but I think that the number that it did is still incredibly impressive. It's outsold Xenoblade, it's outsold Fire Emblem, it's outsold a lot of other Nintendo series. So I'm not trying to say like the Metroid Dread game did not perform well. It certainly did. So I think that it's safe to say it made a lot of new Metroid fans. And, I think that after Dread came out, we were kind of just like really excited for the Metroid series and its positioning and stuff like that. And 1 year later, I would say that I think that still rings true. I do wonder, or I do hope that Nintendo releases something soon just to kind of keep that momentum going. We've heard forever that Metroid Prime is going to be coming out. And I think that that's still a probability. I think that game has to come out soon. So I'm really hoping that they can kind of get that out soon, or a Fusion remake, or maybe even Metroid 6. Like something, let's keep the momentum going. I do feel good about what Dread did for the Metroid community and for the Metroid franchise as a whole. I think that the standing is definitely in a good spot right now, but I do want to see it kind of like continue. Like after Metroid Prime came out, and that was the best-selling Metroid title game at the time, it felt like we had a lot of Metroid stuff. Like we had Prime 2 2 years later, and then we had Zero Mission, and then we had Hunters, and then we had Pinball, and then so I want to see something going. I know that we have Prime 4 in the cook, in the oven, and it's getting worked on. It's probably going to get showed off sometime this year, but I do want to see them continue with something to to kind of keep the, again, like we talked about at the beginning, keep the momentum going.
I
Like
yeah, I
it hasn't even been a year yet, and we have 2 Figment action figures coming out. Like one, we know what it looks like, and the Emmy's coming out after that. And it's like, we got merch already? Yes.
Yeah, but that's not like, I feel like that's not like, Nintendo stuff, Like I want Nintendo to be like, okay, Metroid Dread did awesome. Let's keep it going,
Yeah, I wish that. I mean, look, at the end of the day, Metroid Dread, fantastic game, and I think it was really important for Nintendo in terms of like, hey, there's still a fan base for this game that really like. Do I think this game really created a ton of new Metroid fans? I don't think so. I think a majority of the people who got this game were already Metroid fans, but this game I think did fantastic. It's it's a top selling Switch game. Is it one of the best selling Switch games of all time? No, I think it's in the top 50, but not much farther into that. But like, I mean, it did better than Mario and Rabbids Kingdom Battle, which is getting a sequel soon.
Really?
It's done better than Mario and King. I mean,
I didn't
that's
know
sold
that.
around 2 million,
Wow.
and I mean, I'm looking at Wikipedia. It says as of September, what is it? September something 2018. It sold 2 million copies, but the game had been out for a year already at that point. Like, I don't think it's picked up another million copies. I mean, maybe it has, but like, still, it's done better than that game on this list. It's done better than the new Mario Strikers game,
Right.
Xenoblade multiple times. Like, So it's definitely sold. I think they did. I think they did a pretty solid job making it seem like a big deal, though I do think some of the marketing was a bit confused at times. And I think at the end of the day, it's like it's a smaller 2D game for the Switch. I don't think it's ever going to be treated as a massive gaming experience. I think this was very much a game that was for the Metroid fans, and then they also tried to work it to be accessible to new people, but it was very much for the Metroid fans, and
Right.
that's right there in the name. I think in that way, it was a very important game. I mean, it showed that there's still hype for the franchise, but that is one thing that worries me, that there isn't that like full steam aheadness to Metroid and like pushing more Metroid, or to Nintendo to pushing more Metroid. Like they updated the game, they added boss rush mode, but like no DLC, no real kind of news for a new Metroid game. Like it feels like that hype that was there was great. Like it was a great game and then people moved on. And I wish that there was more follow through that was evident from Nintendo. So I definitely agree with you there. But I mean, Metroid Dread really nailed it. It came back and it brought Samus back. It brought the franchise back. Like it was, for the most part, not an entirely safe game like Samus Returns was. It definitely changed up the formula in a lot of ways, and overall is a really fun experience and is a definitely a highlight of the system. And of course, it's never going to be like a massive Mario or Pokemon or Animal Crossing or Zelda release, but I think it did really well by its fans, and it also, I think, opened up the franchise even a little bit to new players. I hope that Nintendo can build on it more. And it's honestly, I think it's great because, I mean, Metroid Dread, I think, still is, even a year later, looked upon by most people as a really solid entry and hasn't, that hasn't waned over time. And Nintendo sells a lot of games. Metroid is not like a live service game. Of course, a year later, like it's not going to be the talk of the town anymore, but definitely still a great game worth revisiting. I think they did a great job with bringing Metroid back and making it modern. And I just hope they can follow through.
Yeah.
We're over a year beyond and we really don't know what's next for Metroid. And maybe that's fine.
Like,
maybe we don't
yearly
need to know.
releases wasn't a realistic expectation, but I did kind of hope that they would release something in 2022.
No, yeah, but like I would at least want to know by now what's coming up next.
Yeah.
And I would have been down for a little bit of DLC, but I'm okay that what we got with Metroid is the package. Like we paid for it, we got the game, a full game. Right. That doesn't happen often these days, so I'm happy with that. I'm just hoping that they can follow up the hype soon and I think they're still in that window too. If we get some new Metroid news within like 2 years of Dread's release, I think that's totally fine. I think that's going to be Prime 4. So I think there's still the opportunity to do that. And so far I'm happy with how, Metroid Dread came out. Like pretty
incredible.
No matter if it's not perfect, it's still an incredible thing that it came back and it's even called that. So I'm happy with that.
I remember in one of these, some IGN podcast, whatever, was like, they had like Amran Khan, I think he's like senior editor or something like that, Game Informer. Something he said I remember where it's like, the Dread sell well? Absolutely. Like, unless it's like a AAA Call of Duty. Yeah, unless it's like some AAA Call of Duty game, 3 million copies almost is like fantastic for basically any game. However, Dread is not the vanity project. That would be Metroid Prime 4. Since just how much time they've spent on developing it, is Switch developers, etc. So that game, there'll be a lot riding on Prime 4, I'm sure. But for Dread, it did fantastic. And of course, I don't know what Nintendo's expectations were. I've heard they're very happy with it. I figure anyone would be. But
this game, I just did some quick math. This game, if it sold 3 million copies for $60 US, has made like $200 million. I think that when you consider the size of Mercury Steam, you're doing pretty good.
I think that's the biggest thing. Like, it wasn't developed by a massive developer. It was developed by a developer that doesn't have a ton of games under their belt, that's very small. To sell 3 million copies of anything, to outsell new Pokemon Snap, to outsell, a Xenoblade game, Mario, like all these kinds of massive games on a franchise that does not come out very often, like that's saying a lot, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. I've been meaning to tell you, I've been playing Xenoblade Chronicles 3. It's very fun.
I played a little bit of it, but for whatever reason, I just haven't got back to it yet.
I was waiting for Dad to just turn his camera off as I said that.
No.
All right. So yeah, maybe let's end off with like a real rapid fire quick thing, because we got to wrap it up here. Where does Metroid Dread rank among your favorite Metroid games? I think for me, with the flaws that we discussed, I think that I'd say it's a top 3. I think I could say top 3 game behind like Super and Prime.
Griff, what about you?
I'd say it's probably my top five, although I haven't really played it that many times. So not as many times as Prime One or Super or Zero Mission or Fusion,
Right.
because those two are like top four right there. Would probably be number five. I kind of have to play it a bit more, but now that I started I played a hard mode. I tried 100% playthrough for hard mode because I haven't done it yet. Just my primary objective was to get all the endings, and I kind of I missed like one item in Ferenia. I don't know where it is. Then I missed a loan, and I'm just like I gotta beat the game. I gotta go.
Mhm.
But I had a lot of fun, and then I'm going through another playthrough right now, and it's just like it's a lot of fun to play, which is like the thing I knew from the get go. This gameplay looks great. I knew it was
Right.
gonna be fun to play, so it's definitely up there because like I still want to get back to it.
This is for me very difficult because Metroid has always been a game series of high quality, right? And to rank some of the other games below others has never been a mark of like it's not good. It's just been there are
Mhm.
so many really good Metroid games that the top gets crowded, it really does. I think it's Dread is still a game that will grow on me over time. I've had so many years with my favorite Metroid games. I grew up playing Prime. I grew up playing Fusion. I started playing Dread as a jaded adult, you know, with many more options available to me, in a different mindset, a different time in my life. I don't know, like Metroid Prime 4 might do it, but like Metroid Prime, Fusion 2, Metroid Prime 2, Metroid Prime 3, Zero Mission, Hunters. I think those games you'd have to have a really like almost perfect game to like really knock those off the top for me. I
Mhm.
think realistically though, like I would still put Fusion Prime and like Zero Mission above Dread, and then I think 2 also. I could see Dread being a top 5 like at 5th spot for me. But the same, I love Hunters, but I think Dread's probably the better game. And then Corruption I actually really like. That's a really hard toss up. I think I'd still give
Mhm.
it a Corruption, barely edging it out.
Well,
So like, that's the thing.
like the top six, seven, eight games in Metroid are just like which is the least good? Like comparing a
I
98 to a
agree.
97.
Yeah.
But even then, it's like hard to say which is the least good. I think it really comes down to personal preference. Because like, do you prefer 2D to 3D? Do you prefer this style? Like, do you prefer like Super, and like maybe even Zero Mission versus like Fusion or Dread? Like those are, I think,
Mhm.
comparisons that ultimately make it such a toss up. Obviously, I love like Hunters, and that gets throws a wrench in there. Zero Mission, I mean, Fusion and Zero Mission, I think still are easily my favorite 2D Metroids. But I also again grew up with those. It's hard to get
Right.
out of those biases from what you grew up with, and that's why I'm hoping like Metroid Prime 4 knocks it out of the water for me as a full package. But
I remember
yeah,
seeing a
I could
sen-
say it's in the 5 or 6 spot for me.
I know seeing a sentiment where people have played like you've beaten like Super Metroid, Zero Mission, Prime One, and it just wasn't for them. But then they played Samus Returns and they loved it.
Yeah. Well,
So
I agree with what you said. I think like the top, because we do these kind of lists on the Zelda side too all the time, and I think like those are two series I'm deeply involved in. I think with Zelda, like there's very distinct tiers of like these are the great games, these are the pretty good games, these are the not so good games. Where like I think Metroid is like the bulk, like 80%, you could say like here are like the top tier games and arrange them in whatever way that you like best, and like here are maybe some
Yeah.
games that objectively don't hit as hard as the other games. And that list is small,
Yep.
and it comes, it's like your other M's or your Federation forces or whatever.
Yep.
So yeah, I think that I think the Dread was definitely an important game for the series. It seems like a miracle that it happened, and
Yeah.
I've played a lot of Dread. I kind of have a soft spot for Dread because that's what kind of inspired me to to go full bore with like making a website and like writing a guide, and I'd never really done that before. So like I played a lot of it. I studied the map and recreated the map a lot. So I kind of have a little bit of love for Metroid Dread in a personal manner. So it's it's a good one. It's a good one for me. So yeah, that there we go. 1 year later, Metroid Dread still feels unreal to say that this game exists, but
It's been a
if
long year, is what it
yeah,
tells me. It's been a long
what are you
because
talking
it
about? It's
feels like
almost
it came.
over.
If well, like it feels like it. To me, it almost feels like Dread didn't come out a year ago. It almost feels like it's been out for a couple years, but I think that's just how time both feels as an adult feels like it's moving fast, but because of the state of the world
yes,
has been moving slow because there's
I
so much
remember
history
when
happening
like
at
I
once.
remember like when the Assassin's Creed 10-year anniversary was announced, and I'm like, has it been out longer than that? It feels like
Mm.
it's been out forever.
Yeah.
well
Like it
that's
just
a
depends on
series
which you're
that
talking about.
I used to be a big Assassin's Creed fan once upon a time, but
I
anyways,
played up
I
until like
love the
Brotherhood, and I
originals.
got burnt out. Haven't gone back since, even though I've heard good things about like Black Flag. something
Black
like that.
Flag was actually really good. I definitely
What
recommend
was
checking.
that's
that
where
out.
I stopped too.
That's
I
the
played
pirate one.
I played what was the one after Brotherhood? The one
Think
with
3?
I don't know. There was 3 Ezio games and I played them all. And then I played Assassin's Creed 3 actually, you're right. And then I was like, all right, this is enough. I don't need to play anymore. But anyway, that's for another day.
Revelations was the one after
Yes,
Brotherhood.
Revelations,
And then
thank
3,
you.
and then 3.
Yeah.
So wow,
Um,
there's a lot of Assassin's Creed games.
Yeah.
like,
Look at this.
it's outrageous. There's so many of those
There's
games.
a lot. They actually came out pretty much almost once every year, 2 years. That's kind of wild.
Yeah.
I didn't play like Syndicate,
Yeah.
Origins, Unity, Rogue, Odyssey, Valhalla.
The newest one's
Jesus.
about Vikings. That's like, are you sure this is about Assassins and Templars anymore?
I was like, it's too much. It's too much.
Yeah.
Like you got to
All
slow down.
the spin-offs, like there's all these different. Dude,
Yes, too much of a good thing. And we had a lot of a good thing on this podcast, Griff. Thanks for joining us to talk Metroid Dread today. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's nice to finally get around and talk about Metroid stuff for once.
Yeah, absolutely. Whenever we do question and answer shows, Griff is a big part of that. And of course, he joined our Omega staff and has been knocking it out of the park for what has it been almost 8 months now. So we love to finally get you on. Metroid Dread 1-year anniversary. If you haven't played it in a while, go and replay it. Enjoy that game, and just revel in the fact that Metroid Dread exists. That is going to do it for us. We are going to get out of here. We want you to, of course, check us out over on Twitter at Omega Metroid Pod. You can check me out at Spateri316. Dak is at DakCity_, and Griff is at Accursed Hunter 01. And check us out wherever you get your podcast. Like, subscribe, leave us that sweet, sweet 5-star review. That would be fantastic. And of course, check out OmegaMetroid.com. Maps, guides. If you have one item left in Frenia, but you don't know where it is, OmegaMetroid.com. So check that out. We will see you guys next week, everybody. Take care.